This is Amy Chan from CakeDecoratingSchool.com, and if you like cake decorating, you're in the right place. Welcome to our flower series. In this video, we will show you how to pipe a buttercream David Austin rose. From making your colors to piping your blossoms, the lesson will be broken down into segments so you can skip ahead and rewatch as desired. We'll cover the color mixing, the bags and tips we use, the individual techniques, and then how we use those techniques to actually build the blossoms. We'll practice on our flower nail and then also on a cupcake. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you like what you see, you'll check out more in our flower series and our other videos on cake decorating. Color mixing. We're going to start with our darkest color today. We're going to do a really nice dark pink. It's going to be used for the center of our roses. And I'm going to start with my liquid gel colors. I've got, there we go, neon bright pink, red, and violet. And I've just got a little bit of that violet out on my lid. I'm going to use it kind of sparingly compared to the others. I'm going to do drops of the others. So I'm just going to start out with a couple of drops of pink because we want this to be a pink color. There we go. So those two big drops of my pink. I'm just going to try and do a little one on my red, because I want it to have that slightly lipstick kind of tone, and I'm just going to give it a few little specks of that purple. I'm just going to mix this around and check it out. So we're looking to make a rose with a nice kind of dark, deep colored center, and the petals are going to get lighter as they go out. So we're actually going to make a quick ombre fade with this color, and I think this color is going to be perfect. It's going to be a beautiful shade. And I want those outside petals to be nice and light. So that's perfect. That's right where I want it to be. I'm going to grab just a little bit and I'm going to use it to make my next color. So I'm going to set this, my darkest color, aside and grab a new bowl. So you can see I've got some more white buttercream in a new bowl. I've got just a little bit of that darkest color that I made, and I'm just going to take it and I'm going to mix it in. And this is a great way to make ombre colors. You start with your darkest one and just take that and add a little bit to the next color and keep going until you've made enough shades that have a nice level of difference to them. And I'm just starting out with a little bit. I'm going to blend this up, get it going, look at it, and add a little more if I need to. And I think that's going right the way I want it to. I'm just going to add the rest of that in to make a nice medium tone. And then we'll take a little of this medium tone and add it to our third bowl to make a really, really nice light shade for the petals that are going to go on the outside. And that'll give us 3 values of the same color, essentially. So that's looking beautiful. I'm going to take just a dab of this, set the bowl aside, and grab my third one. So I've got my medium shade. I've just taken a similar amount, about a teaspoon of it, with my last bit of white buttercream, and I'm just going to mix that around and make myself a nice super light shade of pink that will be my third color. And if you need to, if it's still reading too close to white, you can always add a little more pink. But this is an easy way to make those pastel colors and really control the amount of color you're using and make some really, really beautiful shades of the same color. And I think it's just going to take just a tiny bit more of that medium value. Just to bring it up, because it's a little in that blush range, and it just needs a little more color just to really read as a pink. Sometimes when it's too light with the pinks, it can almost look ivory. And I think that is going to be perfect. That's going to give us our nice third shade. So we'll have 3 colors that are really nice and different from each other in terms of value, but are actually the same shade of pink, just different spots on that little scale. So that's going to be beautiful. So bags and tips. For this rose, we're going to use a number 12 tip. So it's just a plain round tip with a large opening. You can use other sizes if you don't have a 12, just something nice and big so you can get a big center. And I've just got some extra buttercream in that. In this case, it's white, but if you have extra of, say, your light pink or even the dark pink, you can use really anything for that bag. We're going to cover it up completely so it doesn't matter. We've got a bag with our darkest color that has a 102 petal tip on it. So it's just a nice basic petal tip that's small. So we're going to make small ridges with that. And then we have our medium in a bag with a curved petal tip. This is the number 61. So you can see that opening, it's got a nice slight curve to it. This is the right-handed one. I'm a righty, so I'm going to hold it my right and pull towards myself. If you're lefty, use the ones that curve the opposite direction. That'll be easier for you. Right? And then we have our number 123 tip, also a curved opening. And that's got our lightest color buttercream in it. It's the biggest tip you can see, and it's going to be used for those really large outside petals. So we're going darkest to lightest. So those are the bags and tips we're going to use for this flower. So we're going to use two things to make these David Austin roses. We're going to pipe our normal style petals where we're pulling a nice arched shape towards ourselves. So in that case, we would hold our bag at 45 degrees, right? And we're going to hold it so that that tip is kind of alongside what we're piping, right? Alongside that mound of frosting. And we're going to pull towards ourselves in that arched shape. So the petals are going to look like that. If you do them shorter, you're going to get shorter and you can go higher with it and make longer, taller petals. If you go longer, right, they'll be kind of longer and kind of narrower petals, right? So you can kind of control the height and the width of those by how long you make them, how quickly or high you make that arch, right? And the other thing we're going to do is pipe ridges, and that's actually something we're going to use this bag with the 102 to do. And for that, we're going to be doing this on top of our little mound of frosting in the middle. And basically, you're going to take the fat end, rest it so that it's really making contact with the top of that mound, and we're going to use it to draw a pattern just of ridges. So basically lines straight up and down on top of that mound of frosting. So we're going to use kind of traditional petal strokes where we're pulling that arch towards ourselves. And then we're also going to use the bag in kind of an alternate way where we're using that petal tip to make these nice thin ridges. And we're just going to make contact with the surface of the frosting with the base of that tip. And we're going to use it to pipe almost like a flower-like pattern that'll have 3 petals. And that'll give us the center of those David Austin roses. All right, so we're going to talk about the steps we're going to take and how we're going to build these David Austin roses using our ridges and our arches, right? So ridges and our typical little petal arches. So the first thing we're going to do is take that number 12 tip we showed you earlier when we were talking about the bags we're using, and we're going to pipe a really big, large mound, right? So nice big dot. You can even pipe some excess around it if you need to or want to. And that's going to give us the space on top to pipe this beautiful inside kind of flower shape. And I've drawn the pattern up here. So basically what we're going to do is make little teardrop shaped loops, and we'll start with 3 of them. And then we're going to go around the outside. So we're going to do this repetition, right? So think of it like a concentric flower pattern. And when we get to the point where we can't really go any further out, right? We've kind of taken up all the space on top with this pattern. We're just going to fill in some lines, right? And follow kind of the shape so that we make a nice, beautiful pattern all over the top of that mound. And that's going to give us that beautiful, ruffly, unfurling center that gives you the look of a David Austin rose, right? Because the petals in the middle of those roses are almost teardrop shaped before they unfold, and then they unfold out like that, and they're kind of layered together. So you get that beautiful pattern in the middle. The next thing we're going to do is take our 61 tip, and we're going to go right underneath that central mass, right? So where we did this flower pattern, and that's where we're going to hit with the fat end of that opening. And we're going to use it to make some nice tight cupped petals right around that central mass, that center of the flower. And we're going to do some nice tight petals with that medium colored frosting. Right? And once we get a couple of layers of those on, sometimes it takes me 2, sometimes it takes me 3, it depends, right? We'll add a little more to our base if we need to, right? So if we're looking a little top heavy and unsteady, I might pipe a little more with my 12 tip around. Don't always need to, right? We'll then take our 123 tip, so that's got the lightest color frosting in it, and we'll start a little further down than we did with our 61, right? Still pointing pretty much straight up with the top of that tip, and we'll pipe more of those big, long, beautiful, softly curved arch petals. And then for that final row, because sometimes depending on how high I make them, I might need extra rows of petals. But for the final one, right, when you're getting really close to the bottom, I'm going to take it and just rock it all the way out and just put in a few around the edges to make it look like it's opening. Because a lot of times when you see these beautiful big David Austin roses, they have a really tight center and there's maybe just a few petals on the outside that are really opening up and starting to unfurl, and that's going to give you a really beautiful, soft, and romantic look. So that's what we're going for. We're going to pull out our flower nail and start practicing. So we're going to get started with our rose. I'm going to give myself just a tiny little dab with my excess white or any extra color you have, just to get my paper attached. And I'm going to start out with a traditional dot in the middle, and I'm going to add a little excess material to it because I want an extra wide top on this. So start up off the surface, straight up and down with your bag, do a nice big dot, and finish it off. And then I'm just going to pipe all the way around, right? So that's going to give me a nice supersized mound. So I have a big area on top. You can see a nice big surface area right in the middle of my nail where I can pipe that beautiful flower pattern with my 102 tip. Speaking of which, I'm going to go ahead and get that out, and we'll start the second portion of this flower. So let's pull out our bag with our 102 tip. Just make sure that frosting is flowing out. And we're going to talk about how we're going to orient this pattern. So I'm going to actually just use it to lightly mark my spacing. And you might want to do this because we're basically going to divide the top kind of into thirds. So we want to give ourselves a little guide to work from. It doesn't have to be perfect. And we're just going to draw little teardrop shapes. And we're going to put the bag so that the tip is right there on the surface, that fat end. And we're just going to pull out, circle around, and pull back. You see, you get a nice tight little loop. That's what we're going for. We want it to kind of meet up in the center. And I'm just going to do 3 of those, and then I'm going to continue doing loops around them. To just make that pattern. Beautiful. And you can see they might be a little floppy. That's fine. I'm just going to keep going. Right there, around. So that they join together. And you see we start to get that beautiful look of those layered petals. And I think I can do a 3rd row without it getting too bulky. And then I'm just going to fill in those spaces. So anywhere I have a gap, I'm just going to kind of visualize that outside edge, right? So that there's almost like a little circle in my imagination going around there. And I'm just going to draw little lines to fill up that area. Beautiful. And that's going to give us a wonderful kind of look of those beautiful, delicate little petals in the center that are going to unfold and open up as that rose blooms, and lots of little kind of hidden ones down in there. So now we've got that nice big center kind of started working, and we're going to go in with our 61 tip for the next set of petals. And we're going to just kind of go around the top outside edge, we want it to just kind of overlap the top of that center. So I'm just going to do some beautiful, slow, soft arch petals right there. So this one is one of those ones where we're doing those little arches. And I'm going to go for a nice soft arc to it. So the tops of the petals will be almost flat. And they're just going to be kind of overlapping. Oh, just make sure my frosting is coming out. Overlapping the edges of these kind of center petals. So just nice, kind of like starting to contain that area. I just want to get a few of them, 3 to 4 on there. My frosting is just a little cold, so the top edges are feathering just a little bit, but I actually kind of like the way that looks. If you get feathers or tears there, for me right now it's because my frosting is a tiny bit cold, so it doesn't want to squeeze out of that skinny spot. I don't necessarily mind them. Sometimes it's just pulling too fast. Slow it down a little bit if you see those and see if that fixes it. I'm going to go in and do a second layer. Start just a little lower down. There we go, it's starting to warm up a bit. Keep going with those nice soft arches, and you'll see we start to kind of enclose or contain that center, and we're really getting that beautiful look of those wonderful roses with those frilly centers. And I think I'll maybe take one more row. So I'm kind of doing these little petals spaced out in sets of 3, just to leave some space between them. And so that the ends overlap. Gorgeous. I think I'm ready to pull out my biggest bag. I just want to check my base and add a little bit of extra white to it potentially because it's looking a little skinny underneath. Because these are kind of top heavy, you can see that my super big base isn't quite super big enough yet. So if you need to, add just a little bit of white here and there, anywhere you need that to extend so that it's going to be easy for you to attach your petals. Right? So I'm making it so it's kind of almost the same size as the top now. I find it's easiest to add just a little bit here and there as I go, as needed. I'm going to pull out my big bag with my 123 tip, and I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. Nice, soft, right, shallow arch motion, pulling towards myself. I'm going to pick 2 petals to start in between, and I'm just going to start with that fat end just below the series of medium colored petals I did with the 61, and the point is going to be facing straight up. So you can see that gives me a nice, beautiful petal, right? That's going to start to enclose that second layer. Sometimes when I'm doing these, you might just run into the first ones a little bit, get a little bit of that color on the end of your bag. Just clean it off as you go, whenever you need to. And so you can see I did the trio of petals. I'm going to do another trio. Right around the outside. And you can see we've got that beautiful look to that rose. It's getting darker in the center, lighter on the outside edges. You just want to go ahead and keep doing as many petals as it needs to so that you end up at the bottom of your little base of frosting. And as I go, I'm going to take that tip and rock it out just a little bit. So So if you get a little messy, just go ahead, take a minute, clean off the end of that tip so that you're frosting free, and then keep going. So I'm just gonna go out with my last row. I sometimes like to let them wrinkle just a little bit. And you can see it looks like those last few petals have just opened up. We've used up the entire base, right? You don't see any of that white in between. And we have a beautiful David Austin style rose with a lovely ombre fade from the light to the dark pink. Now that we've done one on our flower nail, I'm gonna go ahead and do one on my cupcake. So same deal with my 12 tip to start, straight up and down, pipe that nice big dot in the center, and I'm gonna go all the way around with a nice spiral to give myself a nice fat area to work with, right? That's gonna give me a great big surface there in the middle to do those wonderful ruffly inside petals. If you're still working on your spacing, take your bag with your 102 tip and just mark that spacing for yourself. So I like to just go ahead and give myself a nice little trio of lines, kind of equally spaced. Think about it like a peace sign. It's a great way to imagine it. So you get that nice little equal spaced trio, and we're gonna pipe those little teardrop shapes around them and then do those little concentric ruffly petals. So I'm just gonna hold my cupcake as I go. Get that first one in there. Second. And third, right? So we got those first 3 little teardrops. We'll go in and put in at least 1, if not 2 layers around them. So that we get our lovely look of unfurling petals. Beautiful. And then I'm just going to make little marks here to imagine that kind of edge of my center, right? Because we want to imagine a little circle right here on the top, and that's where all those central petals are going to be. And then just pull out from each of these centers and kind of follow that curve. You can get a little wild and free with these. It's fine when you do your 61 tip around it. It's going to kind of pull everything together and make those centers look neat. You don't have to worry too much about going over that area or things being perfect or perfectly lined up at the edges. Gorgeous. I'm going to pull up my 61 tip. And I'm just going to start this first layer of petals. I'm holding the bag so that tip is straight up and down, right? The skinny end of that curved tip is pointed straight up. And I'm just going to pipe these first petals so that they kind of eclipse the edges of that center. You can see it's kind of overlapping it. It's going to kind of look like it's closed around it. And I usually pipe the petals on these roses in trios. So think 1, 2, 3, and they're kind of lined up so that they're in between those kind of central flower petals, right? So it's kind of offset from that. And that'll give you a nice, lovely look, right? And then I'm gonna go in between the first 2. Do a second layer of 3 petals. And just pull it down slightly for a 3rd layer. Gorgeous. I'm going to check my base, and I'm actually pretty good. I managed to get him fat and puffy enough that I don't really need to add anything to make him more stable, so I can go right in with my 123. But if you weren't quite fat enough and you kind of ellipsed it and look a little bit like you've got that bobblehead, make sure you go in with your 12 first and add a little around the base. It'll give you security and make it easier for your next set of petals to attach to. So I'm going to do my nice same soft arc with my 123 tip. Opening of that bag, facing straight up and down. Go in, nice trio of petals. Whenever you need to, clean your tip off. Especially with that first layer, I usually pick up just a little bit of the medium pink. And then just keep going in, repeating it with those nice little offset trios of petals. Each time, work the bottom of the tip just a little bit further down that base. And just clean your bag off whenever you need to. And as I go, I'm just going to open up the top, rotate it out for that last row of petals, and that's going to give you a beautiful look of a lovely open flower. If you're working on a cupcake, you can always go in with a 352 tip or another leaf tip and add some leaves as well. But I like a nice tight center and then those last few petals opening up, and it gives me that wonderful, open, loose, romantic look of David Austin roses. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like more about the cake decorating materials and equipment we use, or just some inspirational videos about cake decorating itself, you can follow us on Insta or YouTube at Cake Decorating School. If you'd like to know more about yearly membership and what it entails, you can go to www.cakedecorating.school.com for more information. And if you're interested in these products, you can check the links in the description.